Good morning and welcome to Age Well's webinar on the keys to living and aging well, brain health and reducing dementia risk factors. I'm Grace Smith, Executive Director of Age Well Middle Tennessee, and we're glad you've joined us this morning. This webinar is the third segment of a six-part series, and I want to take just a minute to thank our series sponsor, the Greater Nashville Regional Council, and our partners, Jewish Family Service and the YMCA of Middle Tennessee. Today, we will learn about brain health and things we all can do to reduce dementia risk factors. I'll introduce our three panelists in just a minute, and then you'll hear from them. And as time allows, they will answer questions that you can type in the chat or the Q&A function. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our three panelists today. William Petrie. Dr. Petrie is a professor emeritus of psychiatry and behavioral sciences at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, where he directed the outpatient geriatric psych clinic. With over 50 years in practice as a geriatrician, he has expertise in Alzheimer's disease, depression, and psychiatry, and has provided education and support to thousands of family caregivers. Stephanie McClure. Dr. McClure is a professor of internal medicine and geriatric medicine at the Thomas Frist Jr. College of Medicine at Belmont University. Prior to joining Belmont's new medical school, she served as an adjunct professor of medicine at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, an executive vice dean and professor of internal medicine at Meharry Medical College. That's where I first met Dr. McClure. She has over 30 years experience, including serving as the endowed chair of geriatric medicine at Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center, Amarillo campus, where she led the Geriatric Education Center and the Amarillo Alzheimer's Academy, an interprofessional free service for family caregivers. Our third panelist is Janet Jernigan. Janet is a retired nonprofit executive, competitive athlete, and community leader and volunteer. And I can think of no better model for aging well than Janet Jernigan. She led FiftyForward for 29 years and really is a role model for active aging, having competed in many triathlons and setting several age course records at the Tennessee State Senior Olympics. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Petrie, and again, invite you at any time during the program to submit questions in the chat or the Q&A section. Thank you. Dr. Petrie?
Okay, well, good morning to everybody. This is one of my favorite topics, and I talk about this every day with my patients. Let's get going with the slides. And the issue is, as you look at aging, do you sit quietly and allow the mutations and degeneration to occur, or do you try to take action? Most people understand that, but the problem is they don't really do it. How do you make this get going? Next slide. Normal aging occurs, and the three things that happen primarily with as you age normally is you lose a little executive function. That's the ability to put a lot of things together. You lose what we call working memory. That's remember, if you have trouble remembering the phone number of a 10-digit phone number, you're not alone, because that's another function that generally declines. And also, and the most important, I think, is processing speed slows. That is normal for all people, probably starts in your 30s and 40s. And obviously, if things become a problem in your life, you need to see a physician. But sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. The other issue is that, and there are lots of diseases that we look for patients who come in with memory loss. sleep apnea, delirium, medication, thyroid disease. But most of these people have underlying causes of memory loss or some of what we call mild cognitive impairment. The key with what we're going to tell you is, even if you have one of these bad news diseases, which are almost all age related, you will do better. You will have better functioning, and you will live longer if you take care of yourself. Next. So we think that about 11% of people over 65 have dementia. That's a terrifying number. And as you get older, it gets worse and worse. And we expect by 2050 that the numbers are going to get crazy, that in America, we may have as many as 20 million people with dementia. And of course, it is bad as you get older. So when you get to 75 and 80 and 85, the numbers get scarier. Now, this is why, as you get older, you need to increase your activity and increase your focus on health. Non-Hispanic Blacks and Hispanic Americans do somewhat worse for a variety of reasons. Some of this factor has to do with stress levels. Others have to do with assimilation into a new culture and so on, and increased cardiac risk factors. Next. So we think that probably 35 to 40% of the risk of developing dementia is modifiable. That is to say, you can change your chances by using, we think there's 8 really important factors. And we'll get to that next. Let's go to the next slide. Tennessee's big 3, obesity, and of course, a lot of the southern states, we share this. One of the problems is with poverty, which is also a problem here, bad food is cheap. So it's more expensive to buy healthy food. Tobacco, if you're an ongoing smoker, try to put it down. It's like putting a gun to your head. Probably doubles, if you're smoked throughout your life, it doubles your chance of having dementia. And physical inactivity. Other things really important nationally, it's not on this slide, but blood pressure. Blood pressure at 50, you got to get control of it, because blood pressure at 50 predicts cognitive performance at 70 and 80. Physical activity, and we'll talk about that again and again. Diabetes, another factor. Well, what can you do about diabetes? One of the issues is that as people get older, they lose sensitivity to insulin. And one of the things that does that is because we are constantly eating sweets, which have inflammatory effects, and also have a lot of other problematic effects. And that's the American diet. We eat lots of sweets. Another is depression, because depression often sort of initiates lots of changes as you get older. And if you don't treat it, it will become much more problematic. Depression itself causes memory impairment. Hearing loss, another very important factor, because if you're not listening, your brain begins to shut down functions that you are not listening. And what happens to people who lose hearing is that they slowly disengage, they talk less, and have more difficulty with social interaction, which is so important. And also alcohol. Alcohol in general, moderate drinking is not a terrible thing. Once you get memory symptoms, you pretty much need to cool it with alcohol. Next slide. Lifestyle, really important. Strength, flexibility, and stamina all drop after 55. You probably lose about 1.5% of your muscle mass after 55 every year. 1.5% of your muscle mass every year. So if you go from 55 to 65, you may lose 15% of your muscle mass. Just look at yourself. You don't look like you looked at 35. And in general, we do not do well in America. 62% of women, 75 to 85, have trouble kneeling or stooping and can't lift 10 pounds and have difficulty standing for 15 minutes. This is the very segment of the population that can really improve with increasing fitness and strength training. Fitness predicts longevity more than age and more than what your parents died from. Fitness predicts longevity more than age or more than when your parents died. Remember, if you remember one thing of what I've said today, please think about that. And we're going to talk about fitness next. We talked about that 40%. Genetics has something to do with it, and social circumstances, stress level. It's not good to stress your brain. And if we have healthy behavior, we can also reduce the risk of other chronic illnesses, lung disease, heart disease, and for example, with cognitive disorders, cardiovascular risk factors are very, very similar to the same factors that protect memory. Socialization, which we have learned with COVID, is vital to preventing cognitive decline and also to improve improve vitality and interaction. America did poorly. We totally failed the COVID stress test of our medical care system, which, to be honest, stinks. We do not have care for everyone. We do not do prevention. We do not do maintenance. And that's why America ranks now 46th of all countries in life expectancy, even though we spend tons more than anybody else. We spend a fortune on healthcare. 12% of our gross national product we spend on healthcare, and we are not doing well. We do not have the life expectancy that we ought to have, and we're not taking care of the chronic illnesses. Next. These are the things you must do, and you already know this. Don't smoke. Smoking's bad. It is frankly, it's an inflammatory factor. When the nicotine, the burning nicotine produces these pyrogens, gets into your blood vessels, it's a problem. Even though you don't get lung cancer, and you may not get lung cancer, you will not dodge the vascular effects of smoking. Maintain a healthy weight and keep it about the same. You don't have to weigh 130 pounds or 160 pounds if you're a guy, but maintain a healthy weight. And every day do something, 30 minutes of some kind of vigorous physical activity. We've gotten a lot of data lately on alcohol. It looks like you probably need to drink less than we thought was a good idea. So for men, that's absolutely less than 14 drinks a week, and that's not drinks that you make. I always ask people in the office, what's your drink look like? Oh, I grab a bottle of vodka and I pour 4 inches. Well, that's more than one drink. And the other is eat a healthy diet. And the diet that we know about, forget your crazy diets. The diet that we have more data on than anything is the MIND or the Mediterranean diet. It's combined with a hypertension diet, the MIND diet. Next. Things you may not know. TV is bad for you. All the things that I talked about, physical activity, interaction, socialization, that ain't television. TV's bad. And if you look at mortality figures with people who watch more than 4 hours of television a day, it will surprise you. You will die sooner. You are more likely to get diabetes. You are more likely to have increased all-cause mortality if you watch a lot of TV. I had a patient of mine who was a physician once who was an insulin-dependent diabetic, and he said when he watched television, his insulin requirement went up. I talked about alcohol. How about coffee? Well, it just turns out that coffee is pretty good for you. and you can drink 3.5 cups a day and it will improve cognitive function. Now, as you get older, you want to run your engine. You want to run your cognitive engine, and coffee helps you to do that. So it's one of the good pieces of news that coffee's pretty good for you. I have a lot of people, oh, I don't drink much coffee, and then they're falling asleep in the daytime. They're not doing much. I say, let's just try one, go to Starbucks, try 1 cup. Let's see if that makes you feel better. Marriage improves survival for men more than women. This is no mystery to most people who've been married for a period of time, but marriage is important, and intimate relationships are important. We'll talk about that, how you interact with the people that you care most about. Loneliness is dangerous. COVID has taught us this. It has major medical disadvantages. And if you aren't happy, fake it, pretend to be happy, smile, invite somebody over, do something. Don't just sit there. No one is going to come and knock on your door and say, let's go out and play. And if you have a dog, I mean, if you live alone, a dog's a pretty good idea, especially if you are a man, because animals, and particularly dogs, are very good at this. They help attachment behavior. And as human beings, it is good for us to be attached to other people. Attachment, really, really important. And one of the things we're learning, good, next slide. One of the things we're learning as time goes on is that interpersonal stuff really affects your overall health and your quality of life. The fact that you smile when you see the people you care about, that your interactions are good. So fitness. What kind of fitness? We talked about that. I'll talk about that a little later. Cognitive challenge. People say, should I work puzzles? Well, puzzles are okay, but basically you'll get better with puzzles. You want to do cognitive tasks that improve your function in doing a lot of things. You want to do problem solving. Learning occurs when your brain is working, not when it's coasting. You don't get smarter by watching the History Channel. I'm sorry, you do not. You get smarter by taking a piano lesson or taking a course at one of the local colleges that all offer courses for seniors. Learn something that you don't know about. Get active. Social engagement we talked about. Get to know people that aren't like you. Healthy diet, and that's the one I'll talk about, is the MIND diet, M-I-N-D. It's mostly a Mediterranean diet, not a lot of red meat, not a lot of sweets, not a lot of high-fat dairy. And those are the people, by the way, who live a lot longer than we do. What's good sleep? Well, those numbers are reduced a little bit. We now think that 7 to 8 hours is probably the ideal amount. You shouldn't sleep more than 10. If it's 10 hours, get out of bed, make the bed, don't go back. And then with time, you will shape your sleeping behavior. And then managing adversity, stress, and chronic illness. We learned that, and Dr. McClure, I'm sure, has learned that as well. The optimistic people do better. People who can find some positive aspect, even to their terrible illnesses. And also to have purpose and meaning. That is, your life means something. Your grandchildren are important to you. You do some volunteer work at your church or synagogue or wherever you go, and you engage in meaningful ways with others. Next slide. These are the things. This is why fitness is good for you. It's not. This is science. Fitness does several things. Increases something called nerve growth factor, and actually helps certain neurons in the brain grow. Osteocalcin, very important. That's something that we think is secreted by long bones that helps memory. Blood flow to the brain, your quads, quadriceps, your thigh muscles, biggest muscles in the body. And when you pump them, you are moving. And that's why I believe walking is just a terrific thing to do. Doesn't cost anything. It reduces the incidence of forgetfulness, delays onset of dementia. Instead of getting it at 75, you maybe get it at 85. And that's a good goal for us. improves depression, and it also improves brain connections. That's the white matter. Next slide. I'm in a hurry to get through this. So I think you should walk a mile every day. Walk a mile every day. Not every nice day, not every day like today, but every day. And if you can't walk a mile, you got to figure out how you're going to do something somewhat equivalent. If you have orthopedic problems, you can maybe ride an exercise bike. You can do something, but you have to commit yourself to doing this. Strong quadriceps, that's those thigh muscles associated with improved memory. Walk with others. We talked about a walking club earlier, Grace and I did, which is a great thing because you're not only walking, but you're interacting. Walk outside, particularly if you live in Tennessee, in Middle Tennessee. We have a beautiful country here. We've got lots of beautiful greenery. You can watch the seasons. You can look at the stars at night. It reduces contagious illnesses to get out and walk. Don't worry about getting cold. Cold does not cause infectious diseases. It improves pulmonary function because you're walking, and it also reduces arthritic pain and limitation and other limitations. So if you have arthritis, the worst thing you can do is go to bed and lie still. Next, cognitive challenge. I talked about that earlier, things you can do. Your brain loves to go to college. So you want to put yourself in a college environment if you can. Extend your comfort range. Learn something that you don't know about that you have to figure out. Take courses. Travel, they have lots of exciting travel courses. Rhodes Scholars is one, Osher Lifelong Learning is another here at Vanderbilt. Be creative. Learn to paint. Learn to draw. Learn to operate a camera. Limit TV. Improve your computer skills. You're going to need them because remember that processing speed slows. Read poetry. Even if you have, it's great for cognitive impairment. Read poetry. Even patients who have dementia, they can appreciate the Gettysburg Address or Lincoln's second inaugural. And don't use your GPS. Use your normal orienting skills because that's very important. Next. Replace friends. Loss from retirement and death. Unfortunately, most of us want to pick friends that are just like us, that vote like us, that look like us, and that's a mistake. You want to go back to the 3rd or 4th grade where anybody could be your friend. Talk, but learn to listen to other people. Think about social sports like tennis or Tai Chi or pickleball or yoga. Make friends with, read to your children and grandchildren. Read to your grandchildren. And we said singing and dancing and volunteering. Next. This is that mind diet I talked about. Really much more important than we ever thought. So you want to avoid red meat as much as, you can eat some steak every once in a while, but don't eat a whole lot of it. It's not good for you. It has bad cholesterol. It increases colon cancer. It increases lots of other problems. Red meat, the red meat we eat today has a lot of bad stuff in it that we have put there. We have bred cows to be fat, lazy, and fatty. So concentrated sweets, do not drink sodas, and even diet sodas are not very good. High-fat dairy, not good for you. Refined carbohydrates, ultra-white flour, and that kind of stuff. And try to avoid fried food if you can at all. Next. Social connections have a lot to do with lifespan, health outcomes, and happiness. Marital dissatisfaction associated with sudden cardiac death. So if you're fighting with your spouse or your significant other, it's going to shorten your life. So make peace. Don't go to bed angry. Work on improving your social relationships. You don't know as much about your intimate partners as you think you do. And talking to your partner about your organs or your bowels is not intimacy. And I would avoid that at all costs. Next. So purpose and meaning. What have you learned in your life? What's important? What are your what are the things that people will think about when you're gone? How did you learn it? Who can you help? What will live on? What contributions will live on to you? Start writing and write letters to your grandchildren. They don't know what a letter is. Write it on paper. Next. What you must do, stay active, eat well, sleep, be a lifelong learner, stay away from the hospital, stay away from the emergency room, if at all possible. Talk to your doctor, call him, go in, say, hey, I'm having this problem. It's a huge problem. Avoid, actively nurture relationships, be humorous and generous. Really important. And adapt to illness and adversity, because it's going to happen. You're going to get sick. Bad things will happen, and you need to find purpose and meaning. And is there anything else? Okay, and these are the 6 pillars, things that I already talked about. So I think that's it for me, Grace.
Greetings. And Grace, thank you so much for inviting us here today to share our thoughts regarding the keys to successful aging. You know, aging is a natural process, so let us celebrate it. This is a new day and age with this new and current environment. So in other words, Americans are living longer and living healthier lives. So the purpose of my presentation is to stimulate you to think outside the box and find creative solutions to thrive as we age. So let us stop coming up with excuses as to why we aren't doing something. Let's start today with a different mindset. Aging indeed can lead us to new abilities and knowledge that we can share, just as Dr. Petrie has described to you earlier. Next slide, please. So race, culture, and our spiritual beliefs impact our worldview, our experience of health and illness, and our health-related behaviors. Spirituality has been identified as an important aspect to African Americans and for many Americans in general. Religion or spiritual beliefs promotes better health, better behaviors, and is associated with less alcohol, drug use, less cigarette smoking, more physical activity and exercise, and a better diet. However, having said this, we must also be concerned for religious fatalism. As a physician, I often encounter this with a number of my patients. So what is religious fatalism? It's the belief that health outcomes are going to happen anyway, or are already determined. Unfortunately, these types of thoughts may actually inhibit healthy behaviors. However, when I encountered this, I tried to remember and share a story that often reminds me of something different. It's the story of the drowning man. And that story is told in many ways, but it runs along the storyline of something of a religious man in the floodwaters. He's barely hanging on. And 3 separate people come along to rescue him. But each time he sends them away, refusing the help, stating that divine intervention will save him. Well, after the 3rd person leaves, the man drowns. So when he gets to heaven, he's upset and he asks, why was he not saved? And God informs him that he did try to save him, but he turned him down. Now, this just comes to remind us that sometimes God is right smack in our faces and wants us to use the resources that he has provided us on earth. Now let's turn our attention back to earth. Next slide. We must consider the negative impacts of health and social economic disparities. We do know that there is a higher prevalence of Alzheimer's or dementias, other dementias for Black and Hispanic older adults. we do know that culturally, there is a strong correlation with diabetes, which is very high in our Latinx population, as well as hypertension and stroke in African Americans and heart disease in Caucasians. Given that we are living longer, there's more diversity among adults, and that older Hispanic and non-Hispanic Black Americans are disproportionately more likely than whites to have Alzheimer's disease or related dementias, as you heard from Dr. Petrie. We know that older Black people are twice likely to have Alzheimer's disease or related dementias compared to older whites, and that older Hispanic adults are 1.5 times more likely to have Alzheimer's disease. All these details you can find in the 2022 Alzheimer's Facts and Figures report through the Alzheimer's Association. Next slide. The higher prevalence of Alzheimer's disease in Black and Hispanic populations appears to be due to the higher risk of developing dementia. The difference in this risk is explained by historic disparities, such as socioeconomic, health, life experiences, such that research suggests that the difference in that risk is explained by these disparities produced by those historic and continued marginalization of Black and Hispanic people in the United States. I mean, as you are aware, structural racism permeates many aspects of life that may directly or indirectly alter dementia risk. Just think about it. It influences environmental factors such as where people can live, the equality of schools in their communities, and exposure to harmful toxins and pollutants. Now, these influences may cascade and compound across the course of a person's life. Another issue that I'd like to bring to your attention is the mistrust of the system and misconceptions about Alzheimer's disease, perhaps being a normal part of aging. So it's more common for diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease or dementia in general to be missed or delayed among Black and Hispanic older adults. Next slide. So health screening results in early detection of hypertension, diabetes, and high cholesterol. Therefore, it's very important that we all obtain our annual checkups and ensure that we have our blood pressure, blood sugar, and cholesterol all checked. Now, not only that it's checked now, but we also need to ensure that something is done about it when it's abnormal. So what do I mean by that? Now, how often have I seen where patients, especially Black and brown, who are found to have elevations in these, but yet the healthcare provider having them to come back for follow-up, say in 6 months, or don't address it at all and have them to come back in 1 year. Now, you all, we cannot let this happen. Now, when I said earlier to think outside the box, this is one of those things. This is not acceptable. So as a patient, you yourself can offer that provider to check your blood pressure at home and say, doc, I can check my blood pressure at home and bring those to you or send those to you. So if you're going to do that, it's best to check at bedtime before you're going to bed and check before getting up in the morning. So when you get up, let that be the first thing you do. And send those readings in to your healthcare provider and make sure you get follow-up with further instruction. And again, don't settle for long intervals for follow-up if the blood pressure is consistently elevated. As we age, our blood pressure may get higher as the blood vessels may stiffen. This results in the systolic pressure going up, which is the top number. For example, if your blood pressure currently is 120/80, it might rise to 150/80. Well, you may ask, well, what can we do about those stiff blood vessels? Well, not much as far as nature is concerned. However, you can make a difference in your destiny by lowering your cholesterol and triglyceride intake, for example, which could be preventative in slowing this process down. Another thing commonly happens as we grow older is our bone mass density decreases. In other words, this puts us at risk for osteoporosis, which can result in a fracture if we should fall. And specifically, I'm referring to the hip. However, you can make a difference in your destiny by ensuring that you have satisfactory intake of vitamin D and calcium, as well as participating in weight-bearing exercise, such as walking. You heard Dr. Petrie talk about walking a mile a day. And also ensure that you stay on top of knowing your bone density by having it checked. So why am I saying this here in this particular presentation? That's because if you should fall and fracture a hip, we do know that most people do not return back to baseline, especially if they undergo surgery and anesthesia, because that itself will put challenges on our memory for a long term. So after the age of 74, most of us start losing weight. We do want to keep a tab on this because, as you heard, we want to keep a healthy weight. However, we don't want to be too low, because too low a weight is actually not a good thing, as it's associated with an increased loss of good health. In other words, it increases our morbidity. As we grow older, we also naturally lose the filtering ability of our kidneys, and we must be very careful about not doing things that will worsen this natural decline, such as we need to avoid anti-inflammatory medications, such as ibuprofen or naproxen, which is a leaf that we can get over the counter, and also avoiding in high dosing or sustained release preparations. You heard Dr. Petrie talk about the importance of sleep and physical activity and exercise for cardiac and brain health. So I won't go into this further, but I wanted to again advise you that you can make a difference in your destiny. You heard about not being in isolation. You need to keep a healthy social circle. Yes, indeed. But you also need to stay away from negative thinking people. You need to be around uplifting people and be engaged in living, just as Dr. Petrie had described. Be mindful of the world around you. Look at the stars in the sky. Look at the trees all around us. Knowing that there is something bigger than ourselves. Focus on your sense of purpose. How can I live the rest of my days in the best way possible? Research has shown that positive age beliefs can provide protection against dementia, even if you have the high risk gene for Alzheimer's disease. Try your best to eat well. As you heard Dr. Petrie talk about choosing the right foods. So many of us, as we grew up, we ate a lot of white bread, which maybe back in the old days, we called it light bread. But if you have a choice, eat wheat or multi-grain bread. Eat a handful of nuts daily, such as almonds. That's a healthy choice. And a plant-based diet is better than eating a daily meal of red meat. You heard about alcohol. Alcohol in general is thought to be good. Certainly if you're already drinking alcohol. However, as we age, our metabolism changes. What was good for us at age 20 may not be good for us as we get older. Keep in mind that if a glass of wine gives you a buzz, then this is probably not a good thing. Keep in mind also drinking one glass of wine on an empty stomach can cause rapid absorption, and that can affect your brain. And of course, smoking has no health benefits at all. Next slide, please. So go do what you need to do to make a difference in your destiny. Schedule an appointment with your healthcare provider and get those first 3 bullets there done. Make sure that there's a true review of your medications. As we grow older, the medications we started taking in our younger years may now be harmful to us now that our metabolism is slowly changing and our bodies may be more sensitive to its effects. For example, Benadryl may have been very effective when we were younger, but is it a good drug for us now? Absolutely not. It is notorious for causing problems with memory, as well as confusion and falls. If there's anything at all that will hopefully keep us from being in the hospital with severe illness and becoming delirious or increasing our risk of memory loss, it would be vaccines. So be sure to receive your flu shot every year and get your pneumonia shot, which is the pneumococcal vaccine. And now please get your COVID shots and boosters. Anything to keep you out of the hospital is a miracle and a domain for you to affect your destiny. Next slide. You've already heard how life expectancy can be influenced by several things. And I would like to spend just a little bit of time about my own culture and certain beliefs. So to my fellow sisters and brothers, our hair is our crown, and we love our hairstyles. It is common for us to want to limit or even avoid exercise because of our hair. In fact, it's been noted that anywhere between a quarter to half of us feel like our hair prevented us from maintaining a healthy body weight because we did not want to mess up our hair. Now, I know for me, when we talk about 30% of our genetics affecting our life expectancy, I have to step back and say, what is most important to me for my quality of life? And I would like to share my family. This is my family in this slide here. This is my mother's side of the family. Now, my genetics tell me that the overwhelming majority of the adults in my family are overweight, if not otherwise obese or morbid obese. Next slide. And many have diabetes and hypertension, and the majority of my ancestors have died of stroke because of these. Next bullet, please. So I've asked myself, do I want to be a healthy ager, or am I only concerned about not exercising because I just want to keep my hair looking good? If I kept that attitude, my hair might be looking good all the time, but I'm going to be dead early with my hair looking good in my open casket. This is not who I am or what I want, nor is it what I want to happen to you. I am 61 years old, and I have some tips and pearls I'd like to share with you. Next slide. Yes. So please make exercise part of your routine, as I've made it a part of mine. Since I like to ensure that there is nothing that's going to interfere with my exercise routine, I like to get up early in the morning. When I get up early in the morning, I'm looking at 4:30 because I'm still work. And 4:30, nothing interferes. Even if I go out of town, nothing interferes with that time. But you need to choose a time that works for you. I make it fun. I gamify my activity by competing with myself by keeping track of my accomplishments. I compete with my grown daughters who live out of the state, and we use a smartwatch to compare data. I also do competitive running. For the past 6 years, I've participated in 5Ks and other races. And for the majority of them, I've been able to place the top 3 of my age group. My oldest daughter recently got me involved in rucking. Now, this is actually better than running. It's much better on your knees. Now, rucking is when you carry a rucksack on your back. A rucksack is like a backpack, but it's more heavy duty. And you put heavy weights in it. So for me, I put about 10 pounds of weight plus my water and what other necessities I need. and I go walking. We do know that rucking expends twice as many calories than walking, and it also builds core strength. Now, I would like to get back to our hair. Everyone is different about their hair. So learn what your hair likes, what it dislikes, and how to make it flourish. There's no right or wrong way to explore your hair. For naturally curly hair, which has a tendency to be dry, you can moisturize it, but don't use mineral oil or formulations of alcohol, which can dry your hair out. Use water in moderation to simply hydrate the ends and tuck those ends in so that they will be smooth, or just wrap your hair so the ends will be smooth. Keep the hair off the neck, do an updo, like this to keep the hair intact, or do an afro puff. Brush your hair. You can put it into a ponytail by brushing it up into a ponytail, or put it in cornrows, or other ways that you can do this. Most of the time when I exercise, I put my hair up into a bun on top of my head. And then I put a bandana around to keep it intact. But I also make sure that there's good airflow. You can also use other accessories such as a headband, but don't cover the entire head because that can create heat. So those are some of my thoughts, and that maybe some of those things can help you get started. So in summary, I would like to advise, maintain a healthy social network. So avoid people who are negative. Stimulate your brain, because a lazy brain is a wasting brain. Participate in physical activity. Be careful regarding what you eat. Share with your healthcare provider regarding your goals and wishes. Squelch your stress. Pray. Be mindful, and become aware of where you are. Meditate on how to keep loving yourself and others, because you have so much more to give and live for. You have a purpose. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. First area I want to talk about just in my own life is exercise and movement. And it's been clinically proven that exercise is the only thing that the studies will back up conclusively that improves brain health. And I think one of the best books on that was by Dr. John Rady. It's called Spark. It's the relationship between exercise between exercise and physical fitness and brain health. And he talks a lot about brain-derived neurotrophic factor. If you're not interested in hundreds of pages about that, you might want to skip some of it, but it's really good. There are a lot of correlations between exercise. About 18% of women, only about 18% get enough exercise, 23% of men. I've been a competitive runner for 45 years. I did triathlons for 35. Kind of my regular exercise routine is that I run about 3 times a week. During this time of the year, I swim 2 or 3 times a week. I work in the yard 3 or 4 times a week. I walk with a good friend a couple of times a week. You've heard that about 150 minutes of exercise a week is really good. I don't want to intimidate folks, but according to Dr. Sanjay Gupta, the keys to the longevity kingdom actually are 450 minutes a week, but that's really only 64 minutes a day. And it'll certainly pay off in all kinds of additional energy. There's a tribe in the Amazons that they've studied that is the healthiest group of people, I believe, in the world. And they actually average 17,000 steps a day, and that's mostly through walking. And I guess on the average on a week's time, I pretty much average that. I've got a sports watch that logs the steps, and so that helps me kind of keep up with it. But for people who might be intimidated, hearing from a long time athlete thinking, I can't do all that. You don't need to do all that. You just need to start out simply. The simplest thing to do is walk. One thing I do a lot of reading, about 3 books a week. And after about an hour of that, I just get up and lap around between my kitchen and my dining room and the living room, or I go out and walk laps around the pool. And you just start out small. There's been a lot of research on running, and you hear a lot that, running's maybe not so good on your knees. Actually, I think most of the research shows that if you start to have knee problems when you run, it's a good thing to stop it. But in the long run, I think most runners, like I am, 45 years of running, my knees are quite strong and have good spacing between the bones. And so that's important. And actually, running has been proved to be the very best exercise for getting the oxygen to your brain and all the aerobic activity that you need. But walking is great, and just about anybody can do that. If you're not able to walk, then there are all kinds of chair exercise things that you can do too. Sleep and relaxation, 7 to 8 hours. You've heard all the things about having a regular bedtime, and I go to bed about 10:30, and I get up with the sun. There's a concept called Japanese forestry bathing, and of course we're fortunate. We've got on a 500-acre farm, and I have a park bench that I have at the top of a hill where I can hike up. It's a mile round trip up to the top of the hill. Got a park bench up there, and I can sit and look, and right at the edge of the woods, and I can just see for miles and miles. That's one of the things that I do a lot, is have a combination. I have my weed and read program. So I get out in the yard and I'll weed for about 30 minutes, and then I hit the hammock for about an hour. And so I do that. With a swimming, I'll swim a half mile, and then I just get on the float and float around the pool and enjoy that and listen to the water. Another good book was probably published about 50 years ago, Dr. William Glasser, and his book was Positive Addiction. And he talks about any types of activities that you can do that lets your mind sort of spin free. So things like gardening and running and all those kinds of things are just really great. They've proven many of those things are more effective even than medication in treating things like depression. One big area is a sense of purpose. Actually, one study showed that for every year that you work beyond the normal retirement age, which I guess would be 65, that it reduces your risk of dementia by 3.2%. So I figure I worked about 10 years longer than a normal retirement age, so I figure my risk got reduced by 32%. But just all the kinds of, just the sense of purpose. I remember I went to a workshop that was done by Daniel Pink, who wrote A Whole New Mind, and he suggested in that everybody needs a mission statement. So we all thought of our mission statements. And after the workshop was over, I went up and got in line, and I wanted to ask him to sign my book. And so when I got up there, I said, "So what's your mission statement?" And he looked really sort of shocked, and he said, "I don't share that publicly." So then he said, "What's your mission statement?" And I said, "Well, I live life with joy, and I hope to inspire other people to do the same." And he said, "Well, you should bottle that up. You make a lot of money," which kind of made me think that his mission statement might be a little materialistic, was why he didn't share it in public. But just all the things, that just taking new classes. I don't know if I should admit to this or not, but my son's real concerned about us living so far out in the country. So he decided I needed a handgun. So he gave me a whole bunch of money for me to go, and I purchased a handgun. So I have my first 3-hour class in a couple of days for that. but just any kind of new activities is just absolutely, if you read a lot of mystery stories like I do, it's a good thing to read something on an entirely different topic every now and then. We have a stream restoration project going on our farm now. And so I read up a whole lot on stream restoration and gotten more into conservation articles. Nutrition, this is where you do, not as I do, but as I say, that's the area where I really need to improve quite a bit. I have tried to do some things. One thing, I drink a whole lot of water. And of course, we know, I think about 73% of your brain and your heart is water, but 6 or 7 glasses a day. I certainly get flu shots, pneumonia shots. I've had all 5 of the COVID shots now with the variant booster. I did add tuna fish and salmon once a week to my diet. I think my, I eat the things that are in the Mediterranean diet or the DASH diet. The unfortunate thing about that is that with all of my exercise, then it seems to leave a lot of room left over for the really bad thing for you, and that's sugar. But I have tried to cut the sports beans after I run in half. I try to cut the energy sports drink when I run in half. I've cut my orange juice that I was drinking in the morning in half. And I try to just have dessert once a week on Saturday nights, but I have to say I really cheat on that because I usually have something like a big piece of fudge pie, and then I have 2 great big scoops of extreme chocolate mousse tracks on top of that. So I've got to keep working on the nutrition. And then the social connections, of course, as we all know, to whom you're married probably has a much higher impact on your risk of dementia than all the other genetic factors. And I've been married 57 years. I've been so fortunate to have a really, really supportive husband. He's in a wheelchair now and has dementia for the last 3.5 years. And but he's always so supportive. He just says thank you every time I do something for him, and he'll say you're just the best person in the world. And so it's just great for me. But the social connections, I've always been really involved in the community organizations like Cable, was in Rotary for 25 years. Just thinking of the things that, I did, like just a couple of weeks ago, I had a big pool party for the church youth group. Actually, there were supposed to be 22 people there and 40 people showed up. It was fortunate, though, however, that I had enough food for that. Let's see, I had my 60th high school reunion over the past weekend for 2 days. There was a large Leadership Nashville annual meeting last week. The week before that, Academy for Women Achievement had a reception that I went to. I'll be looking forward Monday to going to the Age Well Middle Tennessee Sage Awards. My husband and I have haircut appointments the next day. On Thursday, I'm hiking with a couple of friends at Deerwood Park, and then I go to have lunch with a regular group every first Thursday. I have lunch with a lot of women that I went to high school with. On my way home, I'll stop off at FiftyForward and drop off bingo prizes, which I do once a month for their Adult Day Services program. And then when I get home at 3 o'clock, I have a Zoom meeting on a Leadership Nashville project. And then on Friday, I've started to work on a mentorship program for nonprofit executives, and we have a meeting on that in Brentwood on Friday. So those are a lot of the things that I do. I usually do 2-hour workshops on longevity, stress management, brain health. So I've tried to cram it all into just a few minutes. But one plug that I did want to make for groups like FiftyForward is that in all of those major 5 areas of brain health, you can get experiences and opportunities there, all kinds of classes, volunteer opportunities. Volunteering is extremely important. Actually, volunteering has been correlated with improving longevity, particularly in men. So Grace, I'll let you get to questions.
Well, Janet, thank you so much. I don't see any questions in the chat, and we're at the end of our time. So I just want to thank you all again, Dr. Petrie, Dr. McClure, and Janet. Thank you for sharing your insights and your wisdom today. I think we heard a lot of common themes about things we can all do to improve our brain health and reduce risk factors. Just want to invite you all. We do have 3 more segments of this webinar series coming up. Our next session will be on mental health. Then we'll talk about financial well-being. And lastly, we'll wrap up the series talking about spirituality and living with purpose, something we heard about over and over again today. Again, thank you to GNRC for being our series sponsor and to the YMCA and Jewish Family Service as our partners. Thank you all for joining us today. And please keep an eye out for those upcoming webinars. Thanks again to our speakers. Really appreciate your time today.